Hello, I'm Andrew Mackey from Protogen. I'd like to speak briefly on our submission for the topic of creating a site evaluation form for EV charging installations to create a flowchart and questionnaires for electrical contractors to ask the right questions when they show up on a job or prior to showing up on a job to ensure that they're putting together a quality work proposal. We all know in an ideal situation, the project would be perfectly engineered and the contractor simply has to show up, build it to the specs, build it to the drawings, done and dusted, job's over and complete, and everybody's happy. Unfortunately, in the EV world, that's not always as easy as it seems. Protogen is uniquely positioned to satisfy the requirements of this topic as we're in the midst of revamping the EVITP, Electrical Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program curriculum, to version 5, which includes code changes for the latest code cycle, NEC 2023, which has quite a few changes. The other thing that's really important to understand with EV projects is not everything may have been considered. For instance, electrical contractors may or may not, depending on what they do, have extensive experience with ADA requirements. For instance, there's a pretty dramatic difference between installing an EV charger at a person's home, where whatever they want at their home is probably sufficient, versus charging or creating an installation in a public space. Is it a van accessible parking space? Is it a standard parking space? Is it a charging parking space? And it is a van accessible charging parking space. How close are they to each other? What are the bollard requirements? If you can't just put bollards anywhere you want, because that may get in the way of the cordage. So there's all sorts of nuanced details that need to be considered. And obviously we want a contractor to show up to bid a job and understand exactly what they're getting into. So the flow chart we create will first identify the challenges of, is this a small residential job, or is this a fleet charging garage for a massive fleet of vehicles, or is it a public parking space on an interstate system? Those different scenarios are going to have extremely different requirements. So the first thing the flowchart needs to do is identify what job you're up against. The next thing that really needs to be considered for EV charging is the fact that you can't simply tag off a circuit that exists and call it good. EV chargers, depending on whether they're level 1, level 2, level 3 DC fast chargers, can have massive power requirements. And those power requirements can be large enough that in a small residential project, not only do you need to consider the branch circuit you're installing against, is it dedicated, but how does that massive continuous load on that branch circuit interconnect or affect with the feeder circuit out to a sub panel? And it could be a large enough continuous load that it has to account for the service conductors. And that's just a small residential calculation. On the larger projects, you're going to be looking at how many chargers are there, what are the settings for the different chargers, do they have different power sharing or power limiting features. All of these things need to be well understood before the project is bid, because if you don't understand what you're getting up against, it's probably going to be hard to put an accurate price in these projects. If you can't bid it accurately, you have callbacks, you have questions, nobody's going to want to do the work, and the work's not going to be done to the highest level possible. So we're going to review all the literature that exists. We're going to coordinate and integrate the pieces from the revised EVITP curriculum to make sure that that aligns with the latest and greatest industry standards, as well as having a mind towards what the electrical contractors are going to need in order to make sure they do the best work possible. Thank you for your consideration, and I hope we can satisfy this project for you. Thank you.